Today's Shiur is not about the essence of Isseribis, it is about the essence of money. What is money? So many people in the world really know what is the essence of money. But we're not going to deal about Tavas Betza, but from the point of view of Halacha, how do we define money? And the Shaila Halacha Lamaisa is, how do we relate to inflation or deflation? So because our precious younger light didn't go to university and they didn't learn about business or about money, I need just to give a short and brief introduction. Market forces. So inflation means when the value of money goes down. And if a year ago, for $1, you could buy 10 pounds of tomatoes. Now, it's been ages since I bought anything, so don't laugh at me. I don't know, but whatever it is, inflation means a year ago, you could buy 10 pounds of tomatoes for $10. And today, those same $10 will only fetch you 5 pounds. That's inflation. When the worth of money goes down and the worth or the price of goods and services goes up. Deflation is the opposite. If a year ago I could buy 5 pounds of tomatoes for $10, those same $10 get me 10 pounds of tomatoes. So did money depreciate, or it went up, or it went down? That is inflation, is when money goes down and the worth of goods, I say goods and services, because that is what people spend money on. Those two words are magical words in a modern economy. Goods and services. People spend money on services and goods. So it's either inflation or deflation. And in the modern world, nothing is ever stable. So in a healthy economy, there's a very low degree of inflation or no inflation, but a certain minimal degree of inflation is normal. But hyperinflation is when money depreciates in such a crazy pace, and it happens. I remember 40, 50 years ago in Israel, then that is what we had, and then the shekel chadash was born. Maybe sometimes you wonder, why is a shekel a shach? Not named after a famous Rosh Hashiva, that's not the point. It's a shekel chodosh, because the old shekel was worth nothing, it became worthless, so 1,000 old shekels became one new shekel. And since then, more or less, the Israeli economy is stable. So the big question is, how do we define money? And the big nafkamena is legabe ribs. And this is a real challenge for Botei Din, because in the entire modern world, courts, and not only courts, businesses recognize that the worth of money is the real worth of money. So when you claim damages and the court paskins, your claim is accepted and you deserve $10,000 compensation, but the damages were incurred 5 years ago, and $10,000 then are worth far less than $10,000 now. So the court will be machayev, the one that needs to compensate you, the one that caused these damages, to tie those $10,000 into the index. And the index is a statistical determination of money against the sakakol, the sum of goods and services available for the consumer. And it goes without saying, it's self-evident that if you need to compensate the person either for a loan or for damages or for a purchase and you didn't pay at the time and you're paying years later, that you need to compensate him for the decrease in the worth of money. So if the loan or the sum of compensation was $10,000, then the court will say you need to pay $11,000 or $10,500 or whatever the yachas of inflation is. How do we deal with this question in Botei Din al Pi Torah? How do we define the worth of money? Is it the nominal worth? Nominal means numbers. The numerical worth. And 100 shekel is forever and ever 100 shekel. And if you pay 101 shekel instead of 100 shekel, that is defined as ribis. Or do we say no? The worth of money is the real worth of money and not the nominal worth of money. And we need to tie the sum that I am required to pay to the index. And what $100 was worth then, I need to pay according to the worth of money now, which means I'm not going to pay $100, but 110 or 105 or 120 or 3,000. It depends on the level of inflation. And that is a question which both didn't grapple with today, and this vikuach started 500 years ago with a revolutionary tshuva in the Maharashdam. So the Maharashdam was one of the greatest Gedolim. We learn his Torah every day. And there are two tshuvas in Maharashdam dealing with this question. Yoredei Kufayin Bov and Choshev Mishpot Semen Ayin Hey. Let me make this clear. The Maharashdam does not speak about Hilchas Ribis, but rather Mekach Umemkar V'Dinei Tashlumin. First tshuva, Yoredei Kufayin Bov, speaks about an inflationary economy. Second tshuva speaks about a deflation and not inflation. But the Maharashdam is consistent in both tshuvas, and he writes, the worth of money is the real worth of money and not the nominal worth of money. So if I owe a person from years ago $1,000 and I'm paying years later, if there's inflation, we will need to determine how much did the value of money decrease. And that is the sum of dollars you will need to add on. So instead of $100, you're going to pay $150. Second tshuva deals with deflation. And the Maharashdam paskins, instead of $100, you're going to pay $60 or $70 or $80. Because the real worth of money is the real worth of money compared to peri, what Chazal define as peri. In the modern language, the index. And the index is the sum total of goods and services. Now, this is not an absolute science, because how do we know what is the worth of the sum total of goods and services? It's something which is impossible. So we do statistical research what an average family spends their money on. 5% would be schar limud, education. 20% would be entertainment. 10% would be food. And after we do some statistical research, what does an average family spend their money on? Then, stage number 2 is, so how much did education increase? How much did entertainment increase? How much did food increase? How much did housing increase? And that is how we build this structure, this formula of the index. You know, I think that there should be a separate index for the Haredi family, and it would be 45% housing, 45% food, and 10% for all the rest. You know, 3% entertainment. You go to a tish once in a time, or to a siyum. What?
So I'm gonna get a good seat by tish.
So, but the index should be a total different structure. But it is not the way. So we're not dealing with an absolute definitive science. But the fundamental question is, al pi halacha, how do we define money? And in my based in, sometimes we had extreme cases, and sometimes the system is abused. and a person knows he owes money to another party, and he intentionally drags it out and doesn't pay, and that was especially years ago when there was very high inflation. So we had a case in which a loan wasn't paid for more than 20 years. And I think it was a few tens of thousands of dollars. And when it came to pay, it was worth about 5% or 10% of what it was originally worth, that same money. And it's ribis, can't pay more. I owed you $10,000, this is what you're gonna get. And it was worth a fraction of what it was worth then. I think it was shkolim, not dollars, because dollars was never so drastically affected by inflation, but the shkolim were in some other madbeyas were. So this is the sugya we will be dealing today. And like so many other questions, we don't have really makodes mifuroshim, because we're living in such a changing world, and people think that only technology changed. You know, we have cell phones and telephones and technologies that they didn't have at their time, but even the financial system changed drastically. So this is the question we will be dealing with. Tshuvas Maharashdam is the most important source, and two different tshuvas. Dealing with Mekach HaMemka, not dealing with Revis, but the Maharashdam says the worth of money is the real worth of money. What could you buy for your money? That is the way we need to determine money in Dinei Nezikin, Dinei Paro and Chayiv, and all other halachas in which money needs to be transferred from one party to the other. Most of the Gedolim disagree with the Rashdam, and they say the worth of money is the nominal worth of money. And in Sugyas Hashas, especially in Perek HaZohav, it is peri that fluctuates, that goes up and down, but money is always the same. So Tshuvas Oirim Gedolim, he was the Rav of Mitzrayim, one of the Gedolim, one generation after the Rashdam, and Marshach, Anach, most of the Gedolim going back 300, 400, 500 years that deal with this question disagree with the Rashbam and the Chazon Ish. Siman Ayin Beis, Siman Ayin Daled, the Chazon Ish says that's Din HaTorah. Money is money. And if you took a loan, 100 shekel, you can never pay back 101 shekel. That would be defined as ribis, and it doesn't matter at all what you could buy for those 100 shekel when the loan was given, and what you could buy for those very same 100 shekel when the loan is paid. So that is the opinion of the Chazon Ish, Halacha Lemaisa. So why did I choose to start our Zman with this question? Because probably the most clear source is the very first sugya in Perek Ezer Neshech, Daf Samach Omud Beis. So Ezer Neshech ve'Ezer Tarbes, the Reish of the Mishnah is Ribis Yoraisa, and Tarbes is Ribis Derabanan. So the Gemara asks, Mideshach Ribis Yoraisa ve'Kamafarish Derabanan Mechal Yoraisa Neshech ve'Tarbes Chodem Elsei. So why does the Pusik say Neshech Kesef ve'Tarbes Oichol ve'Tizberet? And then the Gemara asks, so just apply common sense. Is there Neshech b'li Tarbes? Is there Tarbes b'li Neshech? Neshech is the loss of one party. Tarbes is the gain of another party. So the Gemara asks, don't you understand that whenever there's Neshech, there's Tarbes? If one party incurs a loss, then obviously the other party incurs a gain. So could there be Neshech b'li Tarbes? And then the Gemara gives an example. Heichadomi. If the condition of the loan was, I lend you 100 and you're going to give back 120, me'ikora kaime mea bedanke, ulebesav kaime mea ve'eser bedanke. So now she explains, I gave you 100 prutis on the condition that you pay back 120 prutis. However, 100 prutis could buy 1 dinar zof, and when payday comes, 120 prutis have the same purchasing power, nothing more. They could buy the same dinar zof. Would that be defined as ribis or not? And the Gemara says, if we say it all depends on the conditions of the loan. And those conditions were 100 for 120. So there's both neshech and both tarbis. If it was a besafaslis, then there's no neshech and no tarbis. And then the Gemara gives the opposite example. I lent you 100 prutas, you give back 100 prutas, but by the time you give back the 100 prutas, they could buy more than those same 100 prutas bought in the day of the loan. So the day of the loan, you could buy a dinner, which is a shtus, dinner zov, and when you pay, you could purchase more. And the Gemara says the same. Ibos amakoras linan, then there is neshech and tarbis. Ibos asofas linan, there is no neshech and no tarbis. So, the question is, maskonas asugya, bos amakoras linan or bos asofas linan? And in Shulchan Aruch, the verdict is clear in Siman Kuf Samach. You cannot lend 100 on the condition that you pay back 120, even though the 120 would not buy more than the 100. So obviously this would prove that money is nominal, and it all depends on what you lent and what you're giving back. What number you got and what number you will pay back. However, there are two pirushim in this sugya. The Ravid has a different gersa, meya bedanke. Or maybe it's the same gersa but a different pshat, and the Ravid says that the condition was you got 100, you give back 120. But by the day when you give back the 120, you cannot buy more goods, more payers than you could buy for 100 when you took the loan. So according to Ravid, that is mamish our question. The buying power, the purchasing power of the money was either increased or decreased. You're getting back more money, but the money you're getting back is worth less or more than the money you got. And that is the question, Bosa Mekoras Lina or Bosa Soifas Lina. According to the Ramban and the Rashbo and Rashi, we're not dealing with the classical example of inflation. We're dealing one coin against the other, which is nechoshes against silver. It's not nechoshes against all the rest of the economy. So this is not the classical example of inflation or deflation. In the modern world, the dollar against the yen, the euro against the dollar, the franc against the euro, I mean, this is a totally different area. It doesn't really affect the average person. Those are madbeyas against madbeyas. However, in the modern world, there is no such a thing. In the same country, in the same system, in the same economy, you have different monies. It's all the same money. If a dollar is decreased, so is a half a dollar. So is a $20 bill. Whether it's Abraham Lincoln or whoever it is. You know, the dollar is a dollar. But in the world of yore, there were different medbayas. And the worth of a medbaya depended on the hardware, on the metal it was made of, whether it's necheshes or kesef or zov. All the medbayas were one of three precious metals. Zov, kesef, necheshes. So there was a matzav in which one medbaya increases or decreases compared to other medbayas of the same country, of the same economy, of the same system. So according to Rashi, Ramban, Rashbo, that's the question of this Gemara. According to the Ravid, it's mamish, what we define as inflation or deflation. Those are the two examples. Shulchan Aruch clearly paskins bosa makoras linan, meya, v'meya me'esem is ribis. But the Ravid didn't write the Shulchan Aruch. And the Shulchan Aruch is based on all the other Rishonim. So we cannot really prove our shayla from this sugya. Because in the Gemara there is no psaki, bosa mekoras lina, bosa sofas lina. It is in the Tur, it's the Rambam Shulchan Aruch. But their understanding is we're dealing with kesef against zahav, and maybe that would be different than the question of kesef against all the goods and services in the economy. And therefore, we don't have a raya brura from this sugya to decide how do we define money. It's interesting, neither the Rashdam nor the Halacha and the Rashbam, none of them bring this sugya. They bring a different sugya, Bo Metzia Mem Dalet. The Machne Ephraim does bring this sugya. But to the best of my memory, and I learned the Machne Ephraim together with the Baylish, I don't think he goes into the Machlokes Daravin and the other Rishonim. But he does bring the sugya Bekesher to the Maharashda. Baba Metzia Mem Daled Amid Beis. And we go back from Eze Uneshech to Perek Azov. So Baba Metzia Mem Daled Amid Beis. The Gemara, there's a Machlokes in the Gemara, which is the fundamental concept of Kesef and what's Peres. Prutas Nechoshes compared to Madbeya Kesef, Mo Kesef. So the three fundamental Madbeyas in days of yore were Prutas Nechoshes, Mo Shel Kesef, Dinar Shel Zov. The dinner cost, that was the top, that was the king, and was made of gold. And therefore it wasn't really so oiver l'soichel. Very few people used dinar zor. It was more as an investment. The other Madbeya was the Mo, which was made of silver, Mo Kesef, which was considered the mainstay of the economy. But most people used Prutas Nechoshes because that's the little money. Now when you went out to the shuk to buy things, so Prutas Nechoshes is Chorif, Mo Kesef is Choshuv. And there's a discussion in the Gemara, Pruta against the Mo. What is Peri and what is Kaspa? And the nafkamana is, Peris go up and down, but Kaspa is always Kavua. And the Gemara wants to prove that the Hava, Tiva Hava. Va'af Reb Chia Sova, the Hava is gold, Tiva Hava. It is defined not as peri, but rather as money. The Rav Oisev Dinra, Mebrati de Reb Chia. Rav took a loan from Reb Chia's daughter, Dinrei Zohav. As I explained, the dinar is Zohav. L'sof Eyakar Dinrei. And the price went up. Otzel HaKamed de Reb Chia. Rav said, I need to pay less because the price went up. And for a dinar Zohav now, you could get more kesef, prutas nechoshes, than then. And Reb Chia Paskind Omer Aizel Shlimla Tabanet Kilen. You need to pay, if you took 100 dinar Zohav, you need to pay 100 dinar Zohav. And it doesn't matter that those 100 dinar Zohav are worth far more kesef and prutas nechoshes than they were then. So that proves. Because money is money, and you need to give back the same sum that you got. There's a din of sobesa, and eventually you're going to learn the sugi. It's one of the most important sugis in Perek Ezedeshech. Sobesa means I can't borrow 5 kilo of potatoes and give back 5 kilo of the potatoes if the price of the potatoes went up. Because that's ribis derabanan. It's not ribis diurais. Because I'm giving back 5 kilos, but it is ribis derabanan, and that is what we define as sobesol. So the Gemara says, if the Hava is peira, how did the Reb Chia Paskin you give back nominally the same amount of dinar that you got? It's like potatoes, the price went up. And by peira there's an issue of sobesol. The Gemara says, no, it's not a raya. Sobesol mutar biyeshloi, or biyotza hasham. Because we're dealing with ribis derabanan, sobesol, it is only if I took from you a kilo of potatoes and it's not the season yet. The potatoes are not available. You got potatoes from somewhere else. You got frozen potatoes that you froze a year ago. But in Yeshloi, or Afar Pishaeloi, in Yotzo Shar, and you could buy potatoes in Shuk, that is not an Isser Revis. So maybe he had Din Resolve. It was easy to achieve Din Resolve. So it's like Yeshloi, there is no Isser. But from this Gemara, it is clear that if we're dealing with money, it's not the real worth, the purchasing power, but nominal. And that is why, if din rezuav have a din of peri, it's a problem. What you're giving back is worth more than what you got. But if it's tivo, if it has a din of kesef, we don't care that it's worth more than what you got. And this is the Ikar Raya from the Achronim that are Choylek and the Rajdam. In this Gemara we see, doesn't matter that money buys more today than it did then. You pay the same sum you got, and it's not defined as ribis. Neither ribis d'oraisa, nor ribis d'rabbanan. And wouldn't that prove that the worth of money is always the nominal worth? The number you got is the number you give back. So that l'cha'oira is a kasha on the Maharashtra. There's a Tosfos, same place, Mem Daled Amud Beis, on a different section, a different stick of Gemara. Tosfos Dibra Mascha Mekech Umemkar. Neder Farish, Im Mochaloi Chayfetz B'Chov Daled Isrim, Kishahoyo Kov Daled B'Dinar, V'Yachekach Zol, V'Hoyo Lamed Beis B'Dinar. The Issa was depreciated, went down against the dinar. So I bought something for Chov Daled Issa. By the time it comes to pay, I was given credit. By the time I pay, Chov Daled Islam, one mo is worth Lamed Beis Islam, not Chov Daled. So how much do I need to pay? Chov Daled Islam? The nominal price? Or Lamed Beis? Eino yochel lifter atzma b'chov daled Isrim. V'lo yimar, ha-dinner hu de'iyaker, ve'isrin amdu b'mkoimom. Elo, yitin lo dinner kesef, or Lamed Beis Isrim. So, this Tosfos is the right of the Merashdam. And the Merashdam brings this Tosfos. Can't be the same blot. The Gemara contradicts the Tosfos. So if it's money, then it's the nominal worth. That's the Gemara. Tosfos says, no. If the Issa was depreciated, you need to give more Isrim. So the Chazon Ish says, no. This is not inflation. This is not deflation. When there are two Madabeyas, by Mekech Umemkar, we say, the assumption was you're going to pay with the Madbeya HaChoshuv. So even though we spoke about Isrim, but it is as if the price was determined by, not by the Isra, but by the dinar, because the dinar is the Ikar Madbeya. So, as you notice, Tosfos speaks about a dinar kesef, not about a dinar zov. Usually in the Mishnah, it is dinar zov, mo kesef, pruta nachoshes. However, even the days of the Tanakh, there were dinar kesef and dinar zov. So the Chazon Ish explains, the ikar money is kesef, as I said before. The Isser was nachoshes, it was more oiver soicher. So according to the understanding of the Chazon Ish, this is a din in Mekach Umemkar. When you get credit, you bought something, and you got permission to pay at a later date, it is as if we clearly stipulated that the price is in the Madbeya HaChoshuv. So yes, we did speak about Chov Daled Isrim, but the real price is dinar kesef, and therefore either you pay a dinar kesef, or you pay lamed beisisin, which is the worth of a dinner case of today. This doesn't prove the point of the Marashda. And therefore there's no stira between the Gemara and Tosfos. Because the Gemara also says that if mo kesef is tiva, if it's the matbeya, then the matbeya is nominal and not real. Am I making myself clear?
Yeah.
Does everybody understand what we're talking about? I hope I make myself clear, but because the concepts are not concepts we usually deal with. So actually, both Chuvas and Marashdam deal with one coin against the other. Groshish against Levonim. No longer Isrim, no longer Dinarim, as we can assume. In every culture, in every country, the Medbeyas were different. So in the days of the Marashdam, both Chuvas deal with Groshish against Levonim. And the Marashdam says, whatever you agreed upon, same number. And it doesn't matter how many Levonim you get for a groshish. So, my first thought was, maybe there is no real machlokes. And the way the Chazon Ish explains Tosfos, and the way we explain the Gemara, we would say the same about the Marashdam, but no. So, the situation the Marashdam deals with is Matbeya keneged Matbeya, but the reasoning of the Marashdam and the svara of the Marashdam, he makes his opinion very clear that the worth of money is the buying power, the purchasing power. And therefore, yes, he deals with inflation and deflation, and he says when you need to pay and when time comes to pay, you don't pay the same sum of dollars. Whether it's groshish or levonim or a mo or a isar or a dinar or whatever it is, you need to pay the real worth, which is purchasing power of money. That's the opinion of the Marashdam. However, most poskim disagreed with the Marashdam, and they learned the Gemara Kipshuto. If it's tiva, then it is always nominal. If it's peda, you have a problem of so beso. If it's tiva, you have no problem of so beso. We don't care what you could buy for money. If you got a loan from 100 and you pay 101, that's ribis, regardless of how much the money is worth by payday compared to how much it was worth when you got the loan.
Is it different than the case of the Gemara even without Chazon Ish, where money doesn't have an intrinsic value? I mean, the Gemara's case is money versus money.
Okay, so comes along the Igris Moshe. Yored Chelik Beisim and Kuf Yudaleh. And he says things have changed. Once upon a time, money had some intrinsic value because it was made of precious metals. But in our days, when money has no real value, it's just the way we relate to money. Everybody would agree that purchasing power is what matters. And therefore, Rav Moshe does deal with ribis, and not with Mekech HaMemka like the Marashdam. And Rav Moshe says, you need to pay an equivalent of what your loan was worth at the time. However, Rav Moshe says that is not my psak halacha l'maisa, even though I think that is what logic would dictate. But halacha l'maisa, because dina de malchusa dina, and the government forces out, imposes upon us to take money at face value, and $100 is worth $100, and therefore it is nominal. And we cannot pay back more than we received. That would be ribis because it's against the law. I don't know what he's talking about. What exactly would be the law? I'm not aware. The Malchus is Machayev to take money at the value that the Malchus dictates. Maybe that was true 70 or 80 years ago, but it's totally unrealistic today. The law doesn't deal with this question. The law leaves it up to the courts. There is no law how much $100 is worth. It's just a number. You have a $100 bill, you have a $50 bill, you have a $20 bill, and you relate to the money as you wish.
There's a regular halacha, an interest-free loan, $100 for $100. And I take you to court to pay me back the Tutzman period, not as a knas. Or this law would be to pay back $100, not to feed them.
It's just because that's what you stipulated. It's not because the law imposes. That's your agreement. You gave a $100 loan. And your agreement was, but if he pays back one day later, then there is no longer agreement. Then the court would say, you need to compensate for the loss of value. So the reason I took a $100 loan, he doesn't need to pay back more than $100. It's just, that was the agreement. It's not the law.
Sounds like a Moshe holds Bikaron, you should pay back more, because if it's closer to the real value, $100 is not Bikaron.
So that's why I don't understand the Moshe. The Moshe understand as if you should be paying back more. The reason you don't pay back more because it's the law. It's not the law. The reason you don't pay back more is because that was the agreement. It's a $100 loan, and the agreement was.
Or Moshe's law, you can't agree to ribbis.
What?
You can't agree to ribbis. Even if you agree to ribbis, it doesn't help you or anything. If we make a 10-year loan, or Moshe's a problem. If we make a 10-year loan and it's for sure going to change,
So the
we're paying back ribbis.
Moshe has a problem. He
He
really
has
has
a problem.
and that's why I think he's not right.
So therefore, he has a simple
More
term.
than that, the law is
In
exactly
simple
the
terms.
opposite.
But it's not on the book of law.
No, the fact that you have to pay back what you agreed to pay back, that's in the book of law.
It's not.
Therefore, the $100 has the
It's
same
not the
$100
book of law.
value
It
10 years
doesn't deal
later.
with the question. This.
Because they don't care about ribbis.
The answer to this question is so obvious. The law doesn't need to say everything. The law doesn't need to say, if you took a $100 loan, and the agreement was you pay back $100, you pay back $100.
The Marshtam would say what?
So why, if it is a law, why if one day passes, no, then you have to compensate him for the loss of, because that is no longer agreed upon. And what wasn't agreed upon needs to be real.
The government's definition of
So I don't understand the logic of Rav Moshe, and I think Ibcha Mistabra Mamish. Because in days of yore, when money did have intrinsic value, Af al Piken we say, but money is money. It's different than potatoes and tomatoes. It's different than horses and cows. Money is different, even though essentially it is like horses and cows, because there is intrinsic value. Va'af al piken, we say money is different. Kal v'choyme bizmanenu. Money stands apart. Money is a tool for purchase. I think kal v'choyme advorim. If the Marashdam wasn't right 500 years ago, he's even wrong, more wrong today. Because today money has no intrinsic value. It is totally different than horses and cows and apples and tomatoes. But money is only the way people relate to money. So why would the real worth of money be purchasing power? Hefech hadvorim. I don't understand Moshe's logic. And the reality it describes, there's no such a thing. It's not a law. It's not a law. And today in the entire modern world, every court would demand you to compensate, even though it's an interest-free loan. But you do need to compensate for the loss of worth. Wouldn't that prove that Dina de Malchusa is that the worth of money is purchasing power? Hefer divrei Reb Moshe. So it's not in the book of law, but it's what all the courts do in the entire world, in the entire modern world. Lo kedivrei Reb Moshe. I feel that today everyone would agree that the Marashdam is right. Because there is no other commodity in the modern world, which fluctuates merega lerega. And in the modern financial system, money is measured every moment, every day. The dollar or any major currency against other currencies, leragoyim tivcheneno, up and down. And then there's the index, which measures the worth of money compared to the basket. The basket meaning goods and services. So in days of yore, there was no way to determine what's the worth of money. It was just impossible. Before statistical sciences, it was a silly question. The worth of money compared to what? Compared to tomatoes, it's this. Compared to potatoes, it's that. Compared to pears, it's different. Compared to sheep, it's one thing. Horses, cows. There was no way in the world one could determine how much money is worth. Even the Marishdam needs to talk about groshes against levonim. So, once upon a time, it was unrealistic to say that the worth of money is purchasing power. Purchasing what? It is only in the modern world that it is far clearer what is the worth of money more than any other commodity. And therefore, I think today it would go without saying that the Marishdam is right. And that's the way we need to paskin. However, by Mekach or Memkar, that's my psak, and that's what we do in our basin, but not in Hilchos Halavor. Hilchos Halavor, we're dealing with it is the Oraisa. We're afraid. And many times they say, Yesh lachshoish that the Minchas Osha might not be right. It's not likely, very unlikely, but Yesh lachshoish. When we're dealing with the Oraisa, Yesh lochosh, maybe he's not right. And we want to be on the safe side. So when we're dealing with Halavor, we say, you pay back what you took and not more. But when we're dealing with the Chashash Rebis Darabona by Mekech Memko or by Din and Nezikin, I paskin, you need to compensate for the depreciation of money. And you need to pay according to the index. Because I think today, we're not dealing with Gzeis HaKosov with Hilchas. However, the Chazon Ish does write, she goes to retire, that money is money. I don't know where it goes to retire. That is definitely the Halacha al Pi Chazal. But maybe that was the reality. There was no other way to approach it. That was the financial system. But today the financial system is different. And today the financial system recognizes that what you owe is the purchasing power. And we have a very clear picture, at least, how the modern world defines purchasing power. That is the index, which every country has. It's not scientifically valid, but it is what the system recognizes. So my feeling would be, today, everyone would agree that you need to compensate according to the index.
Why
By
did you-
inflation,
Yeah,
would
what-
also...
What?
By halva, when there's deflation, there would also...
Yes, but I never had that shaila, because it's very uncommon in the modern world that there is deflation.
They say that Shash Teresa in that
What would
case
you
goes
say?
the other way. That if you lent $100 and there's deflation, you're only allowed to give back 95. Let's say.
Deflation.
Right.
Right, but as I said, we never dealt with that.
So what would you say?
What?
You would say that you pay back the less nominal value?
Yes, yes, it would be ribis if you pay back the same sum.
You're not worried about, you're not chosh for the Mechazash and the Chumrah? I'm saying it can't be chosh for the Chumrah. It's Southern. I'm saying, if the Mechazash is right, then it's not really.
No, he means to say l'chomer and dinamomenes.
Yeah.
The chomer ribis
Is
would
that
go
way?
against the chomer in gezel.
Yeah, it's the opposite. You think, it's just funny.
So if we're machmir by ribis, by inflation, we're running into a chash gezel. You're not paying what he deserves to get. We're more afraid of Yoredeya than of Choshe Mishpat.
With the law changes Psak in Hilchos Halavor, if someone could prove definitively that the government defined their money based on real value, not based on nominal value.
The government does not define the money. It is more a ruling which is based on common sense. Now, let me make something clear. It's not only the courts. The government sometimes pays very late for government agencies, various branches of government. The government is not so straightforward as they expect the citizens to be. And the government sometimes pays very late, and they do compensate. But that is what the courts, in the modern legal system, the courts have tremendous power. And what the courts do is defined as law, especially the High Court in every country. But I don't think it's Dina de Malchusa. It's just common sense. And that's what the courts say, because you need to do the right thing.
The Fred Rav, before I was here, so I was an economist and I worked against the IRS.
Really? Okay.
The rule, regarding the IRS, is that either way, whether they're late in paying the taxpayer or the taxpayer is late in paying the IRS, the person is chayav to pay not the nominal value but the real value.
As I said before, right?
But I'm saying, but that means the government defines paying taxes, but defines the money as we will accept this to compensate for taxes. And they say that it's not based on the number, it's based on the real value, because we'll charge ribis, that's what they call it, but that's just a correction. We'll charge interest at the rate of the CPI.
But I need to correct you. I think the IRS, both ways around, would also give or take interest, and not only the index. The fundamental interest, which is called prime, and if the IRS owes you money, they will also pay interest. And it's defined as interest. Because in the modern world, money makes money. And al pi halacha, that is definitely also. So it is not exactly what we're dealing with today. We're not dealing with interest. In the modern world, the courts would also be mechayev to pay not only in index, but they would add on interest. And that is the prime, the basic interest. And that is definitely al pi halacha, because we're not allowed to take interest.
Could Bezdin force someone to pay interest? Just sounds a regular question. Could Bezdin paskin that we want to create, fine you? Could Bezdin fine somebody?
No, it's not what we do today. We don't have the power today. That's Dina Kassis. We're not done Dina Kassis.
Even though it's normal practice in the business
Yes,
world.
yes.
Even though we're using money based on the way they use it, but we still can't charge that,
Right.
even though they would.
Yes.
Ich mache eine Frage, das macht mir wegen von Places that in both concepts like if so with the rice is not this, even though it goes up and down the valley. They bring that as a raya that didn't maybe that's a chazin shmet, it didn't tell you how long, it's kifin bida, it's kifin nominal value. It's true by so, it's true by money. So even if the money goes up and down, if I borrow $100, you pay back $100, it's by so without it, then I'm on it. It's kifin bida.
But money is never midah. So I don't, I thought about this a lot. Does so prove the point? I don't think so. I think so is midah. Money is never midah. Money is either number. Yeah.
Nominal is kifin bida. $100 pays $100. Places brings it right. You can pay by besh nifsor from so. Just like I can give you so you can go depreciates or if there's inflation in the rice.
So we didn't touch upon Matbeya Shenifsel, and that is the other relevant sugya, which on one hand is different, because we're not dealing with a natural process of inflation or deflation, but a hachlota of a government to pass on Matbeya, and afal piken, you could pay Matbeya Shenifsel. But on his daiti, that is not because nominal value. Even if we say nominal value, this is Matbeya Shenifsel. I think it's more about this is what we talked about. This is our agreement. And therefore this is what you get, even though it's not fair, but
So Is that?
Chozin, agreements.
So is that?
I promise to pay a Matbeya, that is the Matbeya I pay, even though it's Nifsal, on the condition that it's Yoitze B'Mukom Achar. Because if it's not Yoitze B'Mukom Achar, it is no longer defined as money. It's like rocks, it's nothing. But if it's Yoitze B'Mukom Achar, this is what we promised. And therefore, I think it's wrong to compare the Marashdam and the Chazon Ish to Matbeya Shenifsal. I think Matbeya Shenifsal, a Kuli Alba, doesn't make sense. This is a Matbeya Shenifsal. But this is what we agreed upon.
If someone borrows $100 today, the Marasham, the Rabbi Ikra Din, if someone borrows $100 and he comes to pay on time, he should really pay 120 if there's inflation? Or can we say the same? That
No,
is the din.
no, as I said before, but this was our agreement.
But that's
You
the question.
can't agree with us, that's the problem. You can't agree with us.
I think Fidei Rasham would have to pay $120. I mean, I borrowed $100. What is $120? The borrowing powers. When you pay me back in a month.
Maybe.
That's the
So you
problem.
can't- I'll
You
let
can't
them
agree
out.
with it.
No,
If you
that's
agree,
not
don't
fine.
count for
That
ribbis.
is-
I'm not sure. Maybe the Marashdam is only because there's grosses and levonim. But if this is the only Matbeya, that's what we agreed upon.
But
You
that
can't
was the
agree with
entire
ribbis.
of the Chazon Ish.
What?
You can't agree to ribbons though.
Okay.
It doesn't help if you agreed on something, it doesn't matter. What?
If we're saying that money has no inherent value, so would that be considered income?
No, we're dealing with inflation. It's the opposite
I
of it.
understand.
I'm paying back less than I received.
Okay.
So it's not the question of it.
Senechna.
When if we
Yeah,
deflation,
that's
we
what
would
Fidei
be.
Marasham, you would have to pay 120. The truth, like, if you-
I'm not sure because if this is our agreement, this is our agreement.
it's not
Can we
like
agree to
fun.
evaluate something as something that it's not? It sounds funny, but can we agree to evaluate the 100 as 100?
Okay, I think we're running a bit late because I did want to explain another aspect of the same sugya, the development of money, how money actually developed, because this is a huge confusion in some of the Svorim of Poiskim. And I touched upon this regarding Rav Moshe and what I say. Rav Moshe says that today it's Vade Mistaver, because money is no longer has intrinsic value, then it's not mistaver kimarashdam. And I said lehefach, it's more mistaver. No, it's more mistaver that the nominal value is what money is. But mitam achar, I think today everybody would agree to the marashdam because today money goes up and down, and it's clear how much money is worth in every given moment, how much inflation we have, how much deflation we have, and therefore I think today is very mistabik in the Varashtam. So, money developed and drastically changed in essence. In days of yore, going back thousands of years, most of the transactions were barter. Machlef porabamo is the classic example. People went out to the shuk and everybody brought goods. Somebody rose wheat, but he wants barley. Machlef chito b'so'ero, ta'enim ba'anovim, pora b'chamor. Those are most of the transactions. Who knows what the first business deal in history was? What?
Sal Yosef?
No, way before Yosef.
Oh,
Way before Zdei Ephraim.
One sold his side or rib for a wife.
Who?
I don't reach
The very first transaction ended very badly. Cain and Hevel made a barter deal. The Medrash says, all there was by Cain and Hevel was real estate and chattel, karka and metaltalin. They made an agreement. Cain said, all the real estate is mine. I own the world, planet Earth. And everything that is metaltalin belongs to you. Then Cain tells Hevel, I want you to undress because all the clothes you're wearing belong to me. So Hevel tells Cain, then you gotta fly like a bird. because the earth you're standing on belongs to me. Maybe I confused Cain and Hevel. Come, Cain v'horages Hevel. That's what happened with the very first business deal in history. It ended with tragedy. It was barter. Zeh keneged zeh. But then, people had money and they wanted to invest. I want something that will keep worth. If I buy cows, cows die. Fruit dries, or it rots. And that is when they started dealing with metal. Because metal is amid. How do you say amid in English? It's here to stay. It is. So I once explained, why do we put a stone on a keva? Well, where does this mini come from? It's brought in the Be'er Heitev. But what is the logic? So I say the goyim put flowers on a keva. A flower is beautiful, but it's the most temporary thing in the world. In a day it withers away and it's worthless and it doesn't look good. The stone is the most permanent thing in nature. We believe in the Shabbos and Nefesh. They don't. To them, person died is like a flower. It was a pleasure to have him around, but he's gone. He's gone like a father that withered, like a flower, withers away, and there's nothing. Nothing is left. We put a rock, we put a stone on a cave. I was in Prague last week, and this is a thought that I shared with my Talmidim. So maybe that is where the mini comes from. We believe in a Shabbos and Nefesh. So nothing is more permanent in nature than a rock, than a stone. So people started using metal because metal is amid. There is corrosion, but it takes hundreds of years. So precious metals are here to stay. And that is when, instead of barter, changing animals for animals and fruits for fruits and vegetables for vegetables and everything is just for a rega, for such a limited time, they started using precious metals. And then they started using mamrana or checks because metals are very heavy. And when you use metal coins, which are so precious, whether it's kesef or zov, it encourages burglars and robbers and violence. And if you need to go to the shuk with a bag on your plate, says everybody knew what's in that bag. And that is when they started using documentation. Which means 400 years ago we find chuvas about a banco. A banco is the very first type of bank. And the two centers of commerce in Europe were Amsterdam in the north and Venice in the south. And the merchants used to crisscross Europe from Amsterdam to Venice. And in Amsterdam and in Venice there were two bancos, which were like Fort Knox, heavily guarded centers, which had a lot of money, precious coins. And one soicher gave the other just a document. You go to Venice, you go to Amsterdam, this is my signature, and you will collect money there instead of needing to schlep money hundreds of miles and expose yourself to theft, to violence, to murder, to extortion. So money developed. Even in the days of the Chazon Ish, it goes back about 70 years, banknotes, which are shtore kesef, whether it's dollars or euros or shekel, were like shtores. And every country had gold bars, and that was the worth of their money. Theoretically, 100 years ago, you could take a $100 bill, go to Fort Knox in Washington, D.C. or in Virginia, I don't know where it is, and demand, I want this worth in gold. Today, money is worth nothing. Money has no intrinsic value. Even metal coins, they're worth nothing. The metal is worth less than the nominal value of the coin. It's worth nothing. We no longer use precious metals. The worth of money is just money compared to the basket of goods and services. The more money there is, the worth goes down. Too much money. So the sum of money against the sum of services and goods. That is what causes the increase or decrease of the value of money. So money today has no intrinsic value, and it's no longer a shtat. You could go nowhere and collect nothing for your money. The government owes you nothing. The only thing you could do money is buy or pay, and that determines the value of money. So money has changed, even from the days of Reb Moshe, or Reb Moshe wasn't aware that money has changed in his days. So fundamentally, I think that money today is more mistaber, depends only on the purchasing power. That is the value of money. So the Chazon Ish Siman Ayin Beis asks such a fundamental question. There are questions only the Chazon Ish asks, no one else. So the Chazon Ish says, one of the Yesodis in the moment says, Kol HaGazlon HaMeshalmen K'Shas HaGzela, whether it's a mazik or a gazlan. If you destroyed something, you're Meshalem K'Shas HaGzela. And even though the piece of furniture you destroyed a year ago, to buy this very same table costs more today than it did then, doesn't matter. If the table was worth $100, I pay $100. Even though today you could buy 2 tables for $100, or you could only buy a chair for $100. So the Chazon Ish asks a fundamental question. How could din Torah be totally in a thing that is not natural? Because money is an invention. It's a human invention. So how could Ikar Dinei Torah depend on something which people devised, people invented? So if the world would stay as it was thousands of years ago, barter, would there still be a halacha of Kol HaGazlon HaMeshalmen K'Shas HaGzela? Would this halacha be relevant? It's a gzela sakos of Kol HaGazlon HaMeshalmen K'Shas HaGzela. Ve'eshev es gzela asher gozam. It is from this pasuk that we learn Kol HaGazlon HaMeshalmen K'Shas HaGzela. And the same is B'dinei Mazik V'Nizik. L'cha'ira, the same is B'dinei Alva. B'dinei Mekach U'Memka, but that's a machlokes Derish Dam and others. But in Dina Nezikin, that is halacha. Kol HaGazlon HaMeshalmen K'Shas HaGzela. But the concept of Shas HaGzela is an invention. So the Chazon Ish offers 3 different tilts. Shas HaGzela would be purchasing value, not nominal value. How much would the table be worth compared to apples and pears and mules and cows and all the other things, which is unrealistic? How would we know? Compared to what? But the Chazon Ish writes, Me'ikar din Torah, if man wouldn't decide to invent money, which is a human invention, then we would say barter. How much, if you go to the shuk with that table, what would you get in exchange to the table? How many chairs, how many cows, how many apples, how many pears? That is the way we would pass in Kol HaGazlon HaMeshalmen K'Shas HaGzela. Number 2, says the Chazon Ish, there's a chiyuv shel Torah to invent money to be mekayim the din of Shas HaGzela, which is even less reasonable. To be mekayim the din of Shas HaGzela, there would be a chiyuv shel Torah to invent money, which is very strange. 3rd suggestion is compared to precious metals, because that was stage number 2. After Machlaf Pora B'Chamor came precious metals. Those are the 3 suggestions of the Chazon Ish. And my response is an interesting one, no less original than the Chazon Ish. Psochim Daf Nun Dal. Shloisha Dvorim Olo B'Machshova Lehiborois B'Erev Shabbos Ben Hashmoshes Ve'ili Molei Olo B'Machshova Hoyo Bedin Sheyalo B'Machshova. That's a Gemara, Psochim Nun Daled. Al HaMeis Sheyasriach, Al HaMeis Sheyishtakech Min HaLev, V'al HaTvuo Shetirakev. That is heavenly decree. A mace should become decomposed, because otherwise people wouldn't bury Mason. They would keep their loved ones in bed. They would have difficulty to say goodbye. and life would become a tragedy. We would never forget. That is why it's Exedus Shemayim that makes them will rot and become decomposed. People should put them away, and then the healing process will begin. And that is the same reason Exedus Shemayim alameshi yishlakech min halev. Time heals. Because otherwise there would be no agriculture. People would keep Tvua, and the farmers would have no parnasa. So everything is temporary, and that is essential that humankind should thrive. That yesh oimrim is the secret. It was min hashamayim, just like meis she'asriach, tviyah she'terokev, it is essential, not only essential to business and commerce, essential to Dinei Torah. But, and therefore, Chazal said, yes, money is natural. It's like nature. It's not biology. It's not chemistry. It's a combination of psychology and economics, but it is natural. It was meant to be, and it was min hashemayim, and therefore kushim mikol aleisa. Kach nera